friends, welcome back for another video. This is the video that I've been most excited to share with everyone. It's not about farming, it's not about, us working in the greenhouse or the fields or driving a tractor. It's about my personal life and my Colleen, my youngest daughter. And I know everyone has met her on our page. And to those of you that are here looking for a farming video that maybe you just stumbled upon us on YouTube, we do farming videos. However, we're from New Jersey. We're in the off season right now. So we're kind of doing some personal videos on what two ladies do that run a family farm and what we do in the off season. So we've both been talking about our families, and today I'm going to talk to you about Colleen, my youngest daughter. She's 14 years old, and you've seen her on the videos, and some of you have made contact with me, and Colleen is a special needs child, and for me, I am not bothered by questions. Some parents may be, and some of you have reached me through Facebook. I can be found at Nancy McCann on Facebook and sent me inboxes, and some people said, hey, I don't know how to word this. I don't know how to ask you this, Nancy, but what's wrong with Colleen? Or some people have said, I've seen your daughter, and they've shared with me things that they have been through. So that's what this is all about, sharing our experiences and helping each other out. For us, we've been through what many people go through, trying to find a diagnosis for our daughter. She's 14 now, but she was 5 when she was diagnosed, and I'm just going to talk to you about our journey and what we've been through. It's been amazing, what we've been through, and if we can help anybody else out that's experienced the same thing. Colleen was born, normal delivery, normal birth. Nothing out of the ordinary with Colleen. When we knew that we wanted to have another child, we went to the doctor. It was a planned birth, and you're waiting for your child, and everyone. I mean, I'm sure when you meet people that are having a baby and you say, oh, do you want a boy? Do you want a girl? What's the one thing that they always say? I don't care as long as it's healthy. And when Colleen was born, for the first hours, she was healthy, but then we went on to little minor things. She was jaundice, severely jaundice, which many of you watching probably say, hey, my child was jaundice. I was jaundice as a child. But the doctor came in our room and said, look, if her numbers change within 12 hours, we're going to have to fly her, get her out of here, get her to another hospital. And it was going to mean like I was going to have to stay in the hospital. And we prayed, and her numbers didn't go up any, so she was allowed to stay in our hospital. I delivered in a small hospital in Salem, New Jersey, and they allowed me to stay. Colleen had to stay additional days because of the jaundice, and I stayed with her. And Mike came to visit, and he was there until nighttime, when unfortunately he wasn't allowed to stay all night. So then we bring Colleen home. She's days old. We come home, she's still jaundice. We had a nurse at the house just checking on things because that was going to go away and our daughter was going to be fine. We Instead of taking her for visits, the nurse would check her, but then we had that 4-week appointment where we're going back and to see her pediatrician, where he's going to say everything's fine. And that wasn't the case. We went in, and her doctor is awesome. We still see this pediatrician today, and he's listening to her heart, and you knew that something wasn't right. Just he's listening and listening, and he looks at us and he says, I hear something. It's not, he says, it sounds like it's a murmur, but it could be a hole. So our doctors are awesome. Any doctor that you see is great. They've worked so hard to become a doctor, but for him, he was a pediatrician. He said, I'd like you to go to a children's hospital, of our choice. So we live very close to Philadelphia, so that began our journey with Children's Hospital Philadelphia. We went to the cardiologist, and he listened to Colleen, and he says, I could see where it sounds like she has a hole. So he said, but I think she could have 2 murmurs going on, which murmurs are fine. A lot of people have murmurs. So he sends us right there. They did testing. He went in and he found some things, and he said to us, and at that point we kind of knew that you could tell, like, Colleen, just because she was our second daughter, and you could see the low muscle tone in her, is labeled as hypotonia. So at that point, we had where, she was almost 8 weeks, and she couldn't do some things, like her head movement wasn't right, and just very, like, to hold her, you could tell, like, she just couldn't do things like other children could. Um, so at that point, they labeled her as having hypotonia, which is low muscle tone, and we just went on from there um, to see other doctors. And as she grew, she was then never diagnosed, but kind of attached on other symptoms, because the symptoms are eventually what will lead to a diagnosis. And at that point, it was hypotonia, low muscle, that's low muscle tone. She was developmentally delayed because where she should have been sitting up, she couldn't sit up. We could prop her up, we could do the best we could, but then still it would be her neck that would go, because muscles are everywhere. I mean, like, you think about it, your heart's a muscle, everything's a muscle. So for Colleen, she was really struggling, and even to eat, to drink a bottle was tough, because the tongue, I could see, like, the tongue didn't work right, the sucking, although she did pretty good with her bottle, which in later talking to the doctors, they're kind of, that's pretty great that she did so well. So we've had, at this point, we had a bunch of symptoms. I have just a folder here, and it's kept very nice, because it's my folder that dates up until Colleen was diagnosed. And we just saw doctor after doctor, geneticist. Of course, the stuff from radiology is here. Here's a geneticist that we saw, because these doctors are so busy. They see so many people every day. And it was the cutest thing. He took a picture of Colleen, and it's part of her file, because when they go through that, are they going to be able to put a face to the name with the thousands of children that they see, probably a month? So when we saw this geneticist, we saw a neurologist, and just they would say, I'd like to test her for this. I'd like to test her for this. And what do you do as a parent? You go home, you look it up online, and you think, that could be what she has, and it's diseases that I never heard of. And then you on a computer, you're able to read people's stories, and they share what they've been through, and it's like, oh my gosh, that could be, but then there's this, why does she have this? And finally, a neurologist that we saw when Colleen was 4 years old said, and she's had EEGs. EEGs are what are used to see if she's having seizures, and they do them real fast, and maybe she had no seizures at that time, but Mike and I had questioned her eye movement, like what was going on. Because she had low tone, she would do this a lot, where eyes would roll up and her head would drop. And we're talking, very young. She was months old when that started happening. And it was explained, well, she has the low muscle tone, she fatigues easily, and it really is what it looked like, a baby getting tired and falling asleep where her eyes would just roll up. And in fact, in going through pictures, you can really see Colleen's low tone, and I just wanted to share a couple with you. Here she is laying down, and you can see the eyes, and it would just last seconds, and it would say Colleen, and of course she was little, and the seconds, and I just want to share, because then there she was, our happy, sweet baby. She was okay from them to us, but really, what does that do to her brain? After counting them during the day, we're like, let's just count. She had hundreds of these little episodes. Eyes roll up, her head drops. Like, in the morning was horrible. So finally, after seeing so many doctors, and they did all they could. I mean, doctors, they're awesome. They test her for different things, and they were baffled, and they were concerned as much as we were. So we went to a neurologist, and he said, I know her EEGs are not showing seizures at this time. She's 4 years old. He says, I want to bring her in, and we'll do a video EEG. So that means she's going to be admitted to the hospital. And we've been to the hospital plenty of times where, when she was little, she had just these little things where they would keep us for a while and just keep an eye on things. Like, Mom used to watch her before I farmed and before I worked here at the farm, and she knew I would be home soon. I worked night work, and Colleen like had no movement on one side, and it looked like a stroke. So we take her right to the emergency room, and they were baffled, as much as we were. And when I shared that with this doctor, and then he said, bring her in, let's see if she's having seizures. We're supposed to stay 2 nights. And if you ever had an EEG, Colleen just had one recently because they still monitor and see what's going on. You're all hooked up, and in fact, I have a picture of her with all her leads on her head. I don't know if you ever seen that. And you press a button every time she has a seizure, and you mark down the time. Well, at some point, like 4 o'clock in the morning, she was up. She was little. She was in a crib, and I was right there with her. I just stopped pushing the button because it just never ended. The eye rolls, the head drops, and they came in the morning. They're there early. These doctors do their rounds, and they said, you can go home. You don't have to stay. We're going to get her set up on seizure meds. So that was our introduction to seizure medication. So we had the seizures. We still had the low muscle tone. She was developmentally delayed. Just a long list of symptoms. And her speech was delayed at that point. 4 years old, she couldn't say many words. It was mama, dad, just as a baby would talk. And walking at that time, she wasn't walking. She used a walker and a wheelchair, and that's how we got her around. I do have a picture of her when she was little. This was a gait trainer. Because she's too big for, a regular seat that a baby would use, someone developed this that we could just strap her in, and it's kind of a walker, and she was able to walk around the house and just look so happy and playing her little keyboard. And at that time she could hold her head up, so she was always showing improvement. So that was always good. Never went back on what things that she could do. So we started seizure meds, and you would count the eye rolls, the head drops, and then we were at the point where, okay, things are getting better, but now it's, here we are a month, and we're having seizures again. It's like they never went away. So after a year of this, of increasing seizure medicine and adding a second seizure medication, we went back, and it was just about exactly a year. And I said, is there something that we could be missing? Something with, like, in her blood. And I said, because, like, could she have something going on with blood sugar? Because when she eats, she seems to do better, and I know exactly how my mornings are going to be. Like, when she wakes up, she is drained, her eyes are rolled, she can't hold her head up, and things are pretty bad. And the doctor says, explain your morning to me. Let's go over this again. And the team that met with us talked, and they said, we'd like to check her for a very rare disease. And at that point, it was like, how many things are you going to check her for? Like, yeah, it was blood work after blood work, and she did good. Like, she got so used to getting blood work that she was like a champ. Even now, she's known at the lab. Hey, Colleen's here. So they said, we'd like to check her for glucose transport defect, blood-brain barrier. My first question was, can you write that down? That was quite the name. And they said, oh, sure, of course, please go home and look it up and think about it. We'd like to test her for it. And I said, well, it's more blood work, but okay. And that's when they explained it. No, it's not blood work. We'll have to do a lumbar puncture. So I thought, to put my child through this and to test her for something else, and maybe it's not going to be the answer. So I went home, and it was tough to find information on glucose transport defect, blood-brain barrier. It's quite the name, but I found some stuff, and as I read it, like I shared with you before, I went on the computer before, and just some things, things that they had listed maybe weren't the same as what Colleen was going through. But there were the tears, because I knew that that's what she had. So we set up the lumbar puncture, and the way that Colleen had been sedated before, so to me, like, it was scary. They're going to sedate her, and they had to sedate her for MRIs of the brain when she was just months old. She's had a couple of MRIs. Now she's had four. She's had testing on her heart, anything that they have to do where they do have to sedate your baby because she doesn't understand what she's going through. So she had been sedated before, so I was like, she'll be fine. I know she'll be fine. But again, I knew, like, she's 5 years old. We had no answers to what was going on, and this was going to be the test that was going to tell us that she was going to have, at that time, glucose transport defect, blood-brain barrier. And Anita was with me, and I just was crying and crying because you can only take off work so much. Like, Mike had to go to work that day, so Anita took me and Colleen, and it was just overwhelming. I just knew that that's what she was going to have, and it took months, but when I received the call, it was February, and the doctor says we what they do is they do the lumbar puncture, and it shows if there's insufficient glucose available. And if her numbers are low, then from there she does further testing. And he says, let's bring her in for the blood work, and we'll go from there. And they did the blood work, and that's when I got that phone call in February that she has it. She's diagnosed with glucose transport defect, blood-brain barrier, and it was just overwhelming. Like, you finally could put a name to all her symptoms, to have a diagnosis, and then you learn more about this. And at that time, they also said, we can call it Glut-1 deficiency, and that sounded better. It was not quite such a long name. So what it is, as you know, glucose is the primary source of energy, and glucose doesn't cross the blood-brain barrier for Colleen and children that are diagnosed with Glut-1 deficiency. And energy is needed for brain function and growth. So as we're learning about this diagnosis, we also learn there's no cure for this. There's a special diet that she can go on if that's how we choose to, do things for Colleen. There are other, I'm sure, parents that maybe don't do the diet. So then began our journey into the ketogenic diet. And it's been something. When I went to CHOP, we had another appointment to go back and kind of follow up, learn a little bit about the diet. They gave us this paperwork, and I still have it. It's from 2007. And because I told them, I said, I can't find much on the computer about Glut-1. So they gave us this information at the hospital, and if you go through it, it explains to date there are 84 patients. And my thoughts were, wow, you diagnosed 84 people here at CHOP? No, it's 84 people in the world. So talk about rare. So she was admitted the following month. We started the ketogenic diet, and I'll talk to you more because we need a whole separate video about that. And what it does is the diet helped her out tremendously. Everything is calculated out. Everything's weighed on a gram food scale, and it has helped Colleen and children that have seizures alone do the diet. And it's the only thing for her. So what would you do if you're told, hey, this is what we can do for your child? You have to do it. We weaned her from seizure medication when she started the diet. So she was taken off the one right away. The second one we had to wean her from. She was medication free, just on the diet. And it's something because I'm a farmer, and to see what food can do for you. I had a lady at one of my markets say, she's looking around and it's always, hi, can I help you? And she said, you wouldn't understand. My child's on a special diet. And I said, lady, I don't understand. I walked around the table and talked to her, and she just couldn't get over when I explained my diet as to, where her kid was like a gluten-free diet, which is, serious thing. And she just was like, wow, you do understand. And one time at the market, I met a lady that was looking at apples, and she says, and we had apple cider. There was a fall, and she says, my daughter has never had apple cider. Something in me, like, I just knew. I went around the table face to face with her and I said, what do you mean she's never had apple cider? She said she's been on a special diet for years. And she was on a diet not because she had Glut-1, but because she had terrible seizures. And the diet is done for children that have seizures. And she said, you probably never heard of it. It's called the ketogenic diet. And I said, we've been on the diet. And I told her at that time how many years. And we just hugged each other. And here, her doctor was the same doctor that Colleen sees now at CHOP. But her daughter was now an adult and was at Jefferson Hospital. So, you know, how awesome was that? And the diet has been amazing. We were 3 years seizure free, and then her seizures returned. We're back on medication. We're on the diet, like right where we started on the diet. And I'll talk to you more about the diet in another video. So she still has seizures. We're still see doctors. She's still considered developmentally delayed. She's also been diagnosed with autism, and she is also diagnosed with the anxiety disorder, and that's a lot to learn. When I share about Glut-1, because it is so rare, we live in Gloucester County. We have almost 300,000 residents here, and Colleen is the only diagnosed case. So I'm sure there's more people out there with Glut-1, and we'd love to get it out. We'd love to get it out there, and if we could help another family. If you're just battling with, what is my children going through? And I remember a nurse years ago said, would it really help you if you had a name to put behind everything? Well, in our case, it definitely did help us, because from where she started to where she is now, it's just been amazing. And it's been quite the journey. And I remember sharing with someone about, you know, she's the 85th person in the world. And I said, well, you know, gosh, you could have hit the lottery or something. But not better than that, but they didn't know exactly how they were wording things. And I said, well, like, I did hit the lottery, you know. To have a special child is really special, and you don't realize how much you take for granted. And it's tough on everyone. It's tough on her older sister, Jessica, missed so much, because when you have a special child, you try to divide your time, but it's so tough. And we're just blessed that Jess was as great as she was. There was Jessica on the floor when Colleen was having terrible seizures. And certainly not easy for anyone in the family. But we all get through it, and we do the best we can, and Colleen's doing great, and met so many new people that she loved the comments. She just loved all the great comments on the videos. So she's loving this YouTube thing. So many people, when they see us with Colleen, or maybe I had a conversation and Colleen's not even with me, and they always say, God bless you. And I always respond the same. My response is always, he already has. Because how she's changed everyone's life and outlook on life, and how often do you get to witness a miracle? Because the diagnosis, what the diet has done for her, has been amazing. So thank you for watching, friends, for learning. I don't care if one person watches this video. It's just awesome, because you'll now know about Glut-1 deficiency syndrome. So here she is. If you want to look into the Glut-1D Foundation, you can find more information. And to anybody out there struggling for a diagnosis, there's one out there. You may never get a diagnosis, but you certainly do love your child the same. So thank you for watching, friends, and we'll see you next time with another video. Thanks.